Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this workshop today. I'm really glad that you can join me. Today's workshop, Sustainable Hybrid Ministry in 2022. I think if you're here, you agree that there's a few things going on in the world and in our church at the moment, particularly around what does ministry look like in now that we're sort of doing this combination of in-person and digital ministry, both in terms of Sunday services and live streaming, and also with ministries during the week. I think things are starting to change in the way that we connect, engage with people. And so that's one aspect of the conversation today. And the second part is around sustainability, which I think my mind draws first and foremost to the environment and the world that we live in, but it's also just the way that we as active church workers and leaders, how do we sustain the ministry that we do to be in it for the long haul and not burn out? And I know there's been a lot of hard work that's gone into the last couple of years, and that fatigue is very real. So I want to be able to capture some of these things today. And the three main aspects that we want to touch on are: what are the most important needs for you and your team and your church? And then secondly, what steps can you take to engage your church and wider community in a hybrid manner? And then thirdly, what are some of the processes and technologies that we have available today that we can use to simplify the ministries that we have? So I'd love to ask you a few questions first. And I asked this last week with a group of church ministers who I've been working in a program with for last year. And I asked them these four questions. If we think back over the last 12 months, and what I want you to do is there's a little icon along the bottom. It might be the second or third last one, which is like a little chat symbol, little sort of note with some lines on it. So if you click on that, that will open up just a little chat box like you have in Zoom, or if you're more familiar with Zoom. And I'm going to ask you four questions. The first question, I want you to put a P at the front, and P stands for praise. The first question is, in the last 12 months, where have you seen God at work? So spend just a little bit of time now putting into the chat there the letter P, and then where have you seen God at work in the last 12 months? So Liz has seen God at work in his people, in the church who we have and the people we have around us. That's great. Helen said, raising up new people to serve. Wow, what a blessing. Thank you, God. I know that's not the case across the board. So that's a wonderful praise point for St. Alf's. For Jackie, the wonderful volunteers stepping up. Absolutely. It's providing new opportunities for people who may not have felt like they had something to offer, and others who have just, see the job ahead and are just willing and ready, which is wonderful. Helen, openness to the Spirit. That's beautiful. Doug, enabling us to maintain connection with our isolated parishioners. Thanks, Doug. Andrew, in the growth of faith and love among our members. Yeah. And Bruce, bringing me to Anglicanism. Wow, praise God for that. Praise God for his Spirit at work in all our churches. Helen said, and for new seekers, yes, the opportunity of digital has opened up just new ways of being able to connect with people who may not have felt comfortable in stepping into a physical church building for the first time. So that's great. All right. So that's the first question, praise. Second point, is a little slightly related to that. What's been working for you in the last 12 months? And I want you to put a W at the start of that one, just so we don't get it all mixed up. So W for win. So what's your win? What's worked well for you and in your church ministries in the last 12 months? And that will relate a little bit maybe to the praise point, but thinking then about some of the work that's been going into these ministries. So Win, excellent. Helen, technology to enable us to reach people who can't get to church or engaging with us for the first time. That's great. Helen Phillips, embracing change, experimentation in worship, and resilience. Excellent. Jackie, bringing in live streaming and Facebook daily morning prayer. Beautiful. Thank you. Doug, a willingness to have a go at multiple types of ministries. Yes, and there's this thread starting to emerge of people trying new things, experimenting with new ways of ministering to people. This is good. Bruce, connecting with others through technology. Yes, thank you, Bruce. Any other wins? Excellent. Keep them coming through. Question number 3. We're going to put an L in front of this question, L for learning. What maybe hasn't worked the way that you expected in the last 12 months and what might be a learning that that you've come to a conclusion to? I am sure we've all had a lot of things to learn in the last 12 months. Helen said, what worked before doesn't necessarily work now. Whoa. We could spend probably half a day together just exploring that one. Thank you, Helen. What else have we learnt? Doug, getting the balance right between in-church and live streaming. Yeah, it's there's a tension there. It's not a perfect. There's no perfect system, and there's always going to be more that we learn from that. Thank you, Jackie. Encouraging more people beyond the core group to step up. Yes, big challenge there. How do we embolden and enable the whole fellowship to use their giftings? Helen, how to best use technology without burning people out? Yes, there's there can be a very high demand on our technology volunteers, particularly, and the knowledge that they have. And so how can we help to share that knowledge is really crucial, and then be able to bring other people and step them into that as well. Bruce, the need to be agile in our thinking and actions. I love that. Thank you. Liz, taking risks is part of following the Spirit. Yes, and it's not like you've learnt it once and then that's the end. Then there's, there's always more that God's wanting to do in us and through us. Thank you, Liz. Gwen, the congregation aging. Yes, we're all getting older, and yes, it's a very real challenge in a number of our churches. Andrew, the need to be more flexible and respond to changing circumstances. Helen, there's always plan B and C and D. Yes, being able to adapt. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Having a plan and a strategy is a really good thing, but then you can't just do that once and let it sit on the shelf and that's it. You need to keep revisiting it, and it needs to adapt as our circumstances keep changing as well. Thank you. They're excellent learnings. Keep them coming through. The final question, we're going to put a G in front of this one. G is for growth. So how have you grown in the last 12 months? Boy, oh boy. Good morning, Michelle. Queensland represent. All right, so Helen, you've been growing in patience. Whoa, give me some of that, please. Fiona has grown in tech skills. Well done, Fiona. I think we've all grown in that department and still growing. Helen, growing in faith, trust, courage, resilience, flexibility. I love all those words. Jackie's had a slight growth in tech skills. I'll give you a little bit more credit than that, I think. Doug learnt an enormous amount about tech, but also in ministry. That's great. Yeah, so this theme of technology is really coming through. And I think like a couple of years ago, we sort of got a live stream up and running, and we got Zoom. We figured out how Zoom works, and that's really great. But I think we're realizing now there's more to it than just those two things. And even those two things keep changing as well. Fiona's growing in trusting God in all circumstances. Thank you. Helen, much more engaged with the present. Yeah, I really feel that for myself. Just not realizing that I can't keep worrying about tomorrow, but just to rest in what God has for me today. And Jonathan, recognizing the need for a team. Brilliant. Okay, I love all these. Bruce, growing in love for God. Oh, they're coming through. This is great. Helen, constantly revisiting the why factor, not the what. This, I frame so much of what I do now based on this. And Simon Sinek has been talking about this for well over a decade now, where you start with the why. And that helps me to sort of get to the core of what is important. Then I can figure out how what I do and how I communicate with the people around me so that they understand and that we can be on the same page with that vision. So that's excellent. Thank you, Helen. Gwen, reaching more people than those who come face-to-face services. Wow, that's wonderful. And Sylvia, encouragement of members who cannot access technology. Yes, and that's a very important ministry. That's ministry in itself. Every little thing we do, the updating a database and even all those little dry things, we're like, that's God working through us and planting seeds for the future. So don't discount any of that work that needs to happen. This is amazing. Susan, I would add online services are not a concept, but real life. Yeah, so it's not just a consumer thing, but it needs to be, there needs to be genuine engagement in that. And Fiona's grown into humility. Beautiful. Wow, I just want to thank God for right now. And I also just want to pray for us right now. So Heavenly Father, I thank you for, in the midst of so many challenges in the last year and the last 2 years, I thank you for each one here and just how you are moving in us, you are moving in our churches, and you're shaping us more and more into the into the way of Christ. And I just pray that you will continue to bless each person and each church represented here. Amen. Amen. Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, when I shared these questions and got some responses last week with my church program group, the themes that were coming out in here were around God's goodness, his faithfulness, his sustenance, renewed energy, and then around the work that's been done, and particularly thinking about what's coming up in the next 12 months for a lot of churches, laying more of these foundations and frameworks and even like guidelines and policies for the future, because they're expecting there are going to be more people coming on board. And so there's a lot of dry work that has to happen to lay these foundations. It doesn't feel like you're on the cliff face of evangelism and ministry, but I think it's so crucial, and I look forward to exploring more of these things with you now. So look, thank you so much for those very open and genuine responses that you've shared. So let's start to dig into the content for today. And I think what you've shared lays a foundation for how we start to focus on this year and the sustainable ministry that is ahead of us. So in today's session, typically when there's a workshop like this, the right thing to do is to try and solve one very small problem. I love that in theory, but I think for the work and the head space that we're in at the moment, particularly as we're at the beginning of the year and looking ahead, I don't think today is all about just one little problem. So I don't want this to be overwhelming at all. And in some of the stuff that's shared, some of these things are going to be helpful for you now. Some of these things might not be helpful at all. And some of these things might be helpful for later on, or start to have on your radar to be thinking and praying and planning ahead. So as we've all experienced, there's been a pendulum from in-person 2.5, 3 years ago to almost full digital, particularly when we've been experiencing lockdowns, when we've had very small numbers of people allowed in church. It might have been 5 people who can be in the building at one time to broadcast, and even having like a physical radius around us of how far we can travel. Digital was sort of the full swing now, and there's now the pendulum swinging back somewhere into the middle again, into hybrid. And I think most of you will agree that it's not going to be fully back to in person, or else I don't think you'd even be here today. The world's changed, and we're not going back. So these are the 3 things we're covering today. What's the most important needs for you, your team, and your church at the moment? What steps can we begin to take to engage the church and wider community through hybrid means? Thirdly, how do we identify processes and technologies to simplify some of these ministries? Sounds like a very big grand promise. And again, we're just going to be scratching the surface on some of these things. But I hope they're genuinely helpful for you today, and that we can continue that conversation as well. So a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Evan. I think I've met most of you before. There's probably a few of you I haven't met properly. And I think almost for all of you, even if I have met you, it's all been like this online in the last 2 years. And it was really interesting. I was speaking to a friend the other day who I met a couple of years ago, firstly online, and we've overlapped in both sort of a business hub where we meet, which we share, and in a music group that we've been a part of. And then last year I got to meet her in person for the first time, and it was like, wow, you are the person who I expected you would be based on all our interactions online. And it was just a really validating thing, but also that don't discount this, the digital side of ministry. And I'm sure you agree that we have experienced or even like had glimpses of how digital ministry can still be genuine and create true connection with people. Of course, it's not going to be the same as in person. And of course, we want, as many people as we want back into church again. But there's going to be this balance, and there's this tension. So, sorry, about me. Hi, I'm Evan. And look, this is what really makes me tick, and what is driving me is Jesus' love, and to see his gospel shared, particularly throughout Australia. The church has been through so much in the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years, as you know, and there's a lot of catch up that's happening now. But I see this as an opportunity to be Jesus' hands and feet. I've got a real heart for raising up and enabling the next generation, both in, paid ministry, as clergy, but also I think there's going to be more and more importance about lay ministry around technology, around welcoming. And so I think now's a really important time in history. Again, like you all know, there's massive, communication revolution that we haven't seen in 500 years. And so that's opening up new opportunities. So my background in the last few years, I've been helping churches with their transforming to online technology. I've met most of you in training before. I have worked at St. Hilary's in Kew for 6 years in the music ministry and around communications. And I also do some work with the diocese here in Melbourne as well. So I thank you for appreciating me and the work that I've been doing. And I've just got a real heart that now's a time for us in our churches it's not about embracing technology for technology's sake, but it's about the tools that we have to be able to share the gospel. Today, thank you for interacting so much so far. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end, so we might tick a little bit over 11 o'clock if you've got questions, but I want to try and wrap us up by 11. And towards the end, I'll also tell you where you can get some more help if you want to continue this conversation. So, as I said before, the new normal in the last 2 years, AV and Zoom and live streaming have been sort of our big 3 ticks. But there's now, in this new normal that we're in, most of us are in, particularly here in Victoria, Queensland as well. I think we've got someone from WA on the line, and they're going through a lot too at the moment. But we're facing new levels of compliance. We're facing people who just aren't re-engaging with church in the way that they used to before. We're experiencing fatigue amongst particularly ministers who have had to carry big burdens and do a lot of hard work in the last couple of years. And for our tech team as well, which was identified earlier. So I think there are 2 things that we're wrestling with in this. Firstly, we want to find ways to be able to engage more. And as we said, hybrid's not just AV and a Zoom meeting and a live stream with a camera strapped at the back of the wall. That was so 2020. And that's actually not where people are at anymore. I remember like at the start of lockdowns, there's this big surge of, people coming to church online and all that. And I think for a lot of churches, numbers have dropped off in terms of that sort of Sunday service live stream. We've then also got this sort of other thing that I think around the sustainability and the effort that's required, that we can't keep doing more and more and more and offering more and more and more, because we're going to drain ourselves and burn ourselves out, and potentially our team in the process. So what I want us to do is to be able to understand what it is that we need now. And there could be quite a big list of things, but then figure out how we prioritize those things, and then what steps then we begin to take with these things. Is this making sense so far? Thumbs up, nod heads. Yep. Thank you. Good. All right. So yeah, the question is, well, God, what do you have for us now? What do you have for us this year? And what have you got for us in the years ahead? And so this brings up issues around investment, in our stewardship, and in future-proofing our church as well. Sorry if they sound like cliches, but I think they're really important. So let's talk about the first one, identifying needs. Oh, there's the new normal, identifying needs. So I may have shared with some of you before just this framework I've got around the realms of influence. And it basically comes down to you, yourself, your needs. The second one is then the needs of your immediate team, your staff, your key volunteers. The third one then is, what are the needs of the church? And the fourth one is the needs of the world or the wider community, whoever those people are that you are engaging and trying to reach around you. So if we think about like, what are these core needs that we have for the moment? I think for ourselves, we need clarity and being able to not have more and more that we need to do. So there needs to be an element of simplicity. For our team, I think 2 key things, and there's going to be a longer list, and you could think of more of these things. So feel free to spend time later on just reflecting on this around what you need, what our teams need. A couple of things I'm thinking of: unity, to be on the same page, and this idea of sustainability. How do we do this well together and care for each other well and not burn out? The third one then, for what our church needs, and this is, again, you're going to have a range of responses here. Part of it is going to be an understanding of where people are at, and like a sort of an extra dose of empathy that people need for each other, and being able to carry, rest when it's required, but also challenge when it's required. I don't think these are new things. None of these things are new, actually, but COVID has highlighted them and put these into the forefront. And then the fourth thing then is the needs of our world. They need Jesus, obviously, but I think they also just need to have their needs met. And so we need to meet people where they are. So, yourself, your team, your church, and the world. These were remnants. These little descriptions are remnants from something else. So don't worry about them for now. One of the key things I want to have a think about is the experience of going to church these days. The church experience. Ultimately, most people want connection and community in some shape or form. And again, there's this sort of diverse spectrum of where people are at in their church experience. And COVID's accentuated this spectrum further. So people I think about, there are, as we've identified already, there are legitimate reasons that people don't come to church anymore. Health reasons, for people who are exploring church for the first time, or maybe haven't been in a long time and would rather just come online. You might have some people who want to be 3 years back and who just desperately don't want things to change. And that's understandable. That's legitimate. You're going to have some people who hate online church. You're going to have some people who like online church and find it really comfortable to be able to sit on the couch in their jammies with a cup of coffee in their hand. There are some people who have been floating away or have left altogether. There's a really interesting article by Kerry Newhoff, and he's got a theory that fear isn't keeping people at home, but it's actually indifference that's contributing to why church attendance has plummeted. Helen, yes, I'm happy to share this presentation afterwards, and I'll be recording this as well, just to share with people who've registered for today. So here's a link to Kerry Newhoff if you're interested in that. So particularly around people who have been floating or leaving. You've got other people who are just so thrilled to be back together again. And then there are also people who are questioning the value of the Sunday service. So, why are we investing a lot of time in, and resources into just our service on a Sunday when there are, other things that we could be doing with those resources to be engaging with our community. So have you got a few of those people, a few of any of these people in your church? If you've got more than 3 or 4 or 5 of those groups, I'm not surprised at all. So this is a really tricky place for us to be navigating, and hence the need for figuring out, well, how do we do this better? And so around the question of the value of Sunday services, we need to ask, does it meet the need now? And of course, it's going to meet some need, but what should it look like? Should we be putting more resources or less resources into that, typical Sunday service? I'm not suggesting we throw that out at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. So as we think about, well, how do we meet these needs for each of these different realms? I've just got a little framework here for you. And again, I can share these slides. Very happy for you to use this in whatever way you want. But if we fill out the needs that we have here for each of these groups, and then we think about the energy that's required to meet these needs for each of us. So, what's the energy that's required of myself? What's the input that I need to put into here? What's energy is required for my team? What's required of the church, of the world? So this, in a way, it could be the energy required is the input level, and then the fruit is then the output. What potential do we have in being able to meet these needs, and in what God can do there? So you could put You could just write some ideas in there. You could put a number figure on those things if that's helpful for you. So energy is like the input, and the fruit is the output. So as we think about, what we say yes to, what we say no to, what we prioritize, what we pursue, maybe this framework can just help to, just clarify some of that thinking for yourselves. So just want to check in with you. If you can put into the chat box, what's been most helpful about this first section? Can't believe I left my water bottle. I'm not a preacher. I'm not used to standing up and sharing for 40 minutes at a time. Kelly, thank you. The emphasis on needs. Great. Gwen, the validation that you're not the only one experiencing these problems. Absolutely. We're not alone. Jackie said the same thing. Other churches are having the same issue. Yep. The clarification of issues. Thanks, Helen. That's good. Reflecting on the needs of our diverse congregation. Yes, Doug. Bruce, structuring just those sort of fleeting thoughts that we have and having just a bit of a structure to it. I geek out a bit on just structuring those things. So that's good. Excellent. Let's keep moving. So the next thing we want to have a look at is identifying steps for that hybrid engagement. And if we think about how we engage with people and how people typically engage these days, like I love having friends back in my home again. It's been a long time, but slowly starting to come out of the woodwork. So I love that. But of course, during lockdowns, during remote learning for my kids, screen time's increased, videos increased. This is global, and people's habits and preferences have changed as well. So you can't discount the opportunity that is there to connect with people with this. We've all got one. I'm sure we've all wasted time flicking through our feeds or just, clicking on different things on YouTube or Netflix or whatever that is. We're only human, and it's there's no judgment there in how you spend your time. If we think about 168 hours in a week, and if we have people in church, we might have them there for a couple of hours. And if you're lucky, you might have them for another couple of hours in a group together. And if you've got that happening every single week with those people, wow, that's really great. You've got 4 hours out of 168 hours in a week, and that comes out to about 2.3%. If they're just coming to church and not a group, then it might be about 1%, okay? With digital, and these are the legitimate facts. I'm just going to share this little chart with you here. The amount of time that Australia spent on digital technology in the over the last year. Sorry, I was just trying to zoom in. That didn't work. Here we go. So this is the average daily time internet users aged 16 to 64 in Australia. The total combined time each day spent is about 6 hours online. 3.5 hours are streaming or broadcasting video or TV, and 1 hour 46 a day on social media. Wooly dooly. Okay, so if we do the maths there, we're looking at 1.75 hours a day. That comes out to about 12 hours a week, which comes out to about 7%. So people are spending almost more time in one day on social media than they are being at church. So there are opportunities there. So the question is, well, how do we adapt? If we can't physically do more and we don't have the time, and we're not expected to be on the forefront of all the new state-of-the-art technology. Kelly might be an exception to that. but we still can't just stay still and do nothing either. Do you agree with me? This is really hard. Like, I think this is a key tension that we have. So how we do things online are going to be different to in person. And there's going to be this flow of hybrid. It's not either or. It's not just digital. It's not just in person. And as I said before, not just talking about live streaming on a Sunday or the option of working from home, the new era of hybrid work, working from home or, going in the office with the team. They're important, but it needs to become how we engage more effectively, more naturally, and more seamlessly in the everyday, in relationships and in our communication with people. I had a thought there. It's gone. Who cares? All right. If we think about the first impressions, whether this is in real life, in person, or online, that there's like a really subtle process that we go through in connecting and engaging with a person for the first time and to develop that trust. This might not be the perfect order. I was sort of rearranging things when I was putting this together, but I think all these points, and they're kind of in order, there's a sequence to it that it's almost like a bit of a formula in how we connect with people. We need to, firstly, we need to be visible to them, or they're never going to know that we're there. There needs to be some relevance that they identify in that first engagement, that you make an impression. And even, when you're scrolling through a feed or looking at videos, this idea of, a 3-second view, that you've got to capture people's attention in the first 3 seconds or they're on to the next thing. Crazy. What a stupid world we live in, right? But that's the reality. Okay, so you have to be capturing their attention. You've got to make some sort of or they need to feel some sort of a connection to what you're saying or who you are. Then there might be an invitation to some next step, and there needs to be some sort of permission given to continue that conversation, to go that next step, to build trust, for safety, that they feel safe to keep pursuing that. Does that make sense? This applies online. This applies in real life. Hopefully we know how to do that pretty naturally in real life. And so it doesn't have to be too big a shift. Of course, there is a shift in that. But if we think about these things, then we can start to break it down and think about, well, where are we going to be for visibility? What do we put out there that tries to connect with people for the first time? So the content, what it looks like, how safe they feel, all these things, okay? In the in the Forward Church program, which I run, and I'll tell you about that later, we spend quite a bit of time looking at the profile of people in our community. If you haven't gone through that process before, it's really, really powerful. And so you might come up with an avatar of 1 or 2 or 3 types of people in your community. It's like a fictional character. And, people aren't going to exactly match all those traits and things, but it's still helpful to think about, well, then who are we reaching? And then what are the touch points that are required to create that first impression, to be able to continue that engagement and go deeper, and then have the permission to share more openly with them. And when you think about then what those next steps are, this influences everything that we're doing online. It's going to affect the services that we run, the live streaming services. It's going to affect the ministries that we run during the week. It affects our communication with people. It affects the systems that we need to have in place. It affects how we resource those different aspects of ministry. I'll leave that there. I'm going to read you a quote by a church consulting group in the USA. They're called the Unstuck Group. And I read this recently around digital ministry. So let me share this with you. Digital strategies are going to become embedded parts of your ministry strategy. It won't be something separate. It won't be something different. They will be elemental, essential components of how you do what you do to help people far from God meet him and take next steps in their relationship with him. That new clear perspective you have on how your church does ministry will include in-person gatherings and environments, and online gatherings and environments, with both in-person next steps and digital ones. And this is the cool part. And they'll all be completely woven together into one comprehensive way that you do church. And then with this strategy, you'll revisit it, change it, try new things, keep reiterating with the things you learn, because it won't be your digital ministry strategy. It will just be your ministry strategy. That's a real challenge. Like, we put the word digital in front, and I'm super guilty of this. It's in my title, but I can explain that another time. That digital is one thing, and then, the in-person's a different thing. But it's like, no, particularly as we're coming into the new normal and we're talking about hybrid, it's just going to be all part of, the bigger mission of what we're doing. There's a link to that page from the Unstuck group. The quote's somewhere in the middle of that. So if we go back to, the needs, the effort, the fruit, and we can start to think about, well, where is the fruit now? Or where is the most fruit? Both the low-hanging fruit for now, and also when we think about the longer term. So let me just throw to you some steps for engagement in hybrid online. And again, some of these you might connect with and go, yes. Other things you might be, maybe for later or maybe not at all. Totally fine. Here are some ideas. And again, they hopefully, and I think they apply mainly both online and offline. All right. So this is out of my mouth. Take it or leave it. We need to be getting out of our church and into the community more, not expecting people to come to us. Then around this idea of, who are the people in our neighborhood? That Sesame Street song, who are the people in your neighborhood? To be able to understand our community and know the people. So not just to be, know the people in our immediate sphere, but who really are the people who we're trying to reach. And I'm sure you've spent time on this before, but it's just a good opportunity to be reminded again. People watch, observe culture. I'm sure you all do that. The next musical reference is from Little Mermaid. I want to be where the people are, online and offline. Meeting their needs, being Jesus' hands and feet, meeting their physical needs. How do we care for people well? And then we want to be able to encourage our people and empower them and embolden them, that they make it easy for them to be able to do the same thing too. This can happen online, this can happen offline. We want to be sharing stories of connection, sharing stories of God's hand at work. I loved all those things you shared before. They're testimonies in themselves of what the Lord has done. How good. We need more of that. I think we need to simplify our communication, our language, particularly if we're going to be talking to people outside our four walls. Even if we're going to now be live streaming everything and you got people who are searching, don't put jargon in your services. And again, that's going to come down to, well, who you're expecting to connect with in that way. Make friends with the people in your community, business owners, support them, frequent them, share things with them. And how you can do this online is you become friends. You might, have a photo or a little video introducing the barista, and then you can mention them or hashtag their business on your page, and then they might do the same back to you, and you build rapport, you build trust. More people come into their cafe and from your church, and there's just this natural flow and relationships that's happening. So that can happen online and offline as well. Being relevant, being creative. I'm all for creativity. That's another conversation, another day. But having this culture of experimenting is going to be really important. We'll talk about that a bit. So experimenting with socials, experimenting with content and videos. Give it a go. Listen to people in our community and share their stories too. We've talked about first impressions and first time interactions, designing a simple little next steps pathway. We do this in the program as well. And have fun. Don't be super serious all the time. So, #failfast, experiment. It's okay to try new things. Some things will work, some won't. And just give yourself some grace that it's okay if it doesn't work. All right. Gee, time is ticking fast. Feel free to put into the box, something that stood out to you in this little segment around steps for hybrid engagement. I've thrown a lot of stuff at you. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah. So Kelly mentioned going out into the community. Don't wait for people to come to you. You find this to be so important and we often forget. Thanks, Kelly. It's not about the digital ministry strategy. It's about a ministry strategy. That's great. Thanks, Helen. Yep. All right. Keep them coming through. We'll keep moving. All right. So how can we simplify ministry when there's so much in our heads that we need to do? And acknowledge that we all have different things that we're going to be tackling this year. So it's not a one size fits all approach. So again, some of these things might be helpful for you and other things you might realize down the track. But it's good to be aware and be informed of what's available and what the opportunities are. So we can begin to plan for the future in terms of strategy, budgeting, visioning for both the decision makers and the people involved and the people who receive from this as well. So again, I'm going to throw you a bit of a list of ideas. Just write down the ones that speak to you. So in terms of system strategy, system strategy. Okay, ready? First one, and I've said this before, if you haven't gone through this process before of creating a profile of an avatar, a fictional character of someone in your community where they've got a name, then an age, a demographic, what they do, who they are, what their background is, who they hang out with, what they like to listen to, what they watch on Netflix. You can go to town on this. And then start to map ways of touch points, being able to connect and reach out in a genuine way to them and what their needs are. Okay, that's the first one. Secondly, in terms of communications, having a communication plan or a calendar so that you can be on the same page with the other people who you're working with, so that there's consistency in how you do things, that you're not stepping on each other's toes when you're putting different things out there. Thirdly, using a social management tool. If you've got multiple church social accounts, having a social media management tool is really good for providing that consistency again and saving time. So if you're only just on Facebook or just on YouTube, something like that, that's okay. But if you've got Instagram or other places that you're on as well. Next one, when you're creating content, particularly like if you're creating videos or things that require quite a bit of time to produce, creating content in batches like a series and doing one aspect of that task at a time, instead of just shooting one whole video and then editing all that and then shooting another whole video and editing all that. But trying to do that in bulk is going to be a big time saver. If you've got that camera already set up there, you can shoot, instead of shooting one thing, shoot 3 or 5 or 7 things in the one go. And then you can edit them all in the one go. It just streamlines the process. Next one, particularly if you're beginning to share who's creating content with you, if you've got guest content creators, such as, different volunteers in your church who might share their story or something like that, having parameters and guidelines in place for them, like a little one-pager of how if they're going to shoot a little video on their phone, how to set that up, what the lighting should be, which direction they should be facing. Just those little things can be really, really helpful. How long you want it to go for, if there are any things that, or like a bit of a structure to how they share a story or things that they shouldn't say, up to you. But starting to lay parameters and guidelines for volunteers and for content creators is really helpful. Even if you're the main one doing this at the moment, if down the track you're wanting to bring more people in, even if you don't know who those people are at the moment, starting to get things out of your head is going to be so important. All right, capturing stories and capturing data is going to be really important. So if you're wanting to, setting up forms that can be just embedded on your website is a really good way of capturing information into the one place. If you're wanting people to submit videos, having a lot of cloud services like Dropbox, you can create a folder and then it creates a form and you send them a link to that form where they can put their video and it goes straight into your Dropbox. So you don't have to send an email and download it from them and save it somewhere. Or getting videos through email is just rubbish. Brene Brown says stories are data with the soul. So like I'm all for stories. We need both that qualitative and quantitative data for our church and our community. I was talking about having a media repository. So having like a single source of truth with your media for photos, for videos, having one place for it instead of having it on one laptop here and another computer there and someone else has it in their Google Photos or something like that, having one place for it. This is a little bit of a sidetrack, but we don't have to produce all these resources ourselves either. So if we can find official or unofficial content partners who we can share the resources, if we create things we can share with them, this is going to be a real time saver. We don't have to create it all. So starting to think about this value of partnerships. Repurposing content is the next one. So again, this is a time saver that you can, if you've got content in one place, it's, or on one channel, then it's not hard to then just repurpose that a little bit for other platforms and modes of communication as well. So if you've created a video and it's on Facebook, you could put that on YouTube. You could embed that into your website, in a blog. You can share that in an email then once it's done in that way. So you just, you can kill 2 birds with 1 and a bit stones. Very bad analogy. Sorry. I didn't even realize my cat is sleeping up here. And she killed a bird yesterday. Anyway. Having a knowledge hub. Okay, so touched on this before, that we need to be getting things out of our head and putting things in a central source. It could even, just to start with, be a shared collaborative document in OneDrive or in Google Drive or something like that. And then particularly then the more people who you work with, sharing knowledge, sharing ideas is, firstly, it gets it out of your head. And secondly, it breaks down the silos that I have experienced and witnessed in many organizations before. And it doesn't mean other people will, want to steal your IP or your data or anything like that, but it's just very helpful. My friend calls it the bus test. So if you get hit by a bus, knowledge doesn't get lost. Then the next one, I'm hoping all of you have some sort of a church management software, management system for a central database. Hopefully you're not running off an Excel spreadsheet still. Again, this is about having one source of truth and then having the right people have the right access to the data that they need and the things that they need to be able to plan services and connect with people and groups and any other events and calendars and checking in, all that sort of stuff. That can all be in the one place. Massive time saver. If you haven't got that in place, have a chat to me if you haven't got that yet. Well, we're going really well for time. Emails and just templates for communication, for images, that sort of thing. That can be a real time saver. And then if you've got multiple people who you're working with internally, using a proper internal communication system and reducing emails is going to save you a bucket load of time, and it's much better for transparency. Then you won't be forwarding emails and CCing emails and sharing documents that get updated and don't get shared properly. That just becomes very messy. We've all been through that. So let's try and move away from that if you're working in even just a small team of 3 or 4 people. All right. 10:57. Wow, we're doing great. We won't worry about the check-in on this one, okay? So the outcomes for some of these strategies is that hopefully with some of these things in place, we get more clarity, we learn more, we can grow, we get better tools, better skills that can attract getting more people on board. We become more confident, more effective, more efficient. Team unity, we're on the same page. There's more consistency in what we do. Knowledge is shared. There's more trust, more time, and I think this is really crucial for all of us, more rest. I love the Anglican system. I don't fully understand this 6 days a week thing for ministers. We need to rest. We all need to rest. Sorry, I say that in love, and I'm Anglican. All right, so I think this is really important. Clarity is more important than resources these days. There are so many resources available. It's not hard to Google something and then find a ton of information, and then you have to wade through that, and it can be quite overwhelming. And then in that process, like, you might find out about something, so you need then the time required to understand it, the time to synthesize that information, and then to be able to put that into your context. And then you begin to experiment. Then you might create a strategy. Then you might make a decision on that. And then you might invest some money and implement and build out something. That all takes a lot of time and a lot of mental energy. Okay, so there's so many resources out there, but I think using some of these frameworks and tools we've talked about today will provide more clarity on what we say yes to and what we say no to. Okay. So if we think about what our immediate needs are right now, I think that's going to be around clarity, focus, structure that was mentioned before, context, and confidence. Sorry, they weren't like 5 C's or anything like that, but you know. All right, so just very quickly, I just want to let you know about the Forward Church program. I ran this program last year with a few churches from Victoria, South Australia, and Tassie. And it's a structured year-long program that involves training and coaching and implementation. And so the program is for Australian church leaders that want the expertise and clarity to make great decisions to prepare and future-proof our church ministries. Typically in the program, I have 2 or 3 people from each church involved, because then that way they get to experience and hear things together and then be able to share ideas and be on the same page, but then provide their perspective. So it could be the senior or executive minister and the office administrator or other key ministry people involved in that. So the 3 main units we look at are around discipleship strategy, and we look at that avatar, touch points, all those things. Then communication strategy around the socials, production, video, website, all those things. And then the third aspect then are the systems that we need in place. And I've got a very robust system on process on how you can analyze and strategize for different systems. We look at the online service, online events that you run, how to be innovative with new or semi-new technology, and we look at collaboration as well. So that's just a little bit about the program. And look, regardless of whether you're interested in talking to me about that or not, I think I know that you need to be budgeting more for hybrid and digital your requirements. If that's not in the budget, in your church budget already, then you start to need to think about how that gets put in for the next few years. For some of you, it might be that you need to be envisioning other key decision makers in your church on how to move forward. And I know you're all here because I know you all want that because you're here. So it might be, well, how do we start to communicate, and what's some of the language that we need to be using to be starting to forecast these things, even if this is not for right now? Does this make sense? Yeah. And then the question is, well, do you have a really good reason if now is not the right time? If now is not the right time to make a decision on it, then I think you need a really good reason for that. So I think it comes back to that investment of our resources, the stewardship of our resources, and future proofing. So the next steps, I think for many of us, if we don't have those internal resources, which a lot of the churches that aren't big churches won't have that internal resources, it's very hard to do this alone. So either you're going to need to have, an IT person employed, or like as a third-party IT company, but normally they're just interested in your network and your website and your email. If you've got a tech champion inside your church who knows what they're doing and is highly respected and listened to, that's great. But I know that's not for everyone either. Or you can get an external person in to help coach and train and mentor. And this is another thing. I thought about this the other day. As a parent, I can tell my child what to do or like how to learn something, but they won't get it. But if someone else tells them exactly the same thing, they're like, oh yeah. So sometimes we actually need someone external to, just provide that different perspective, even though you might be saying the same thing. So if you'd like to have a chat to me about the Forward Church program, then I'm just going to put a link here in there, and I'll send it in an email afterwards as well. Very happy to have a chat with you about that to see if that would be suitable for your church for this year. We're going to be kicking off after Easter. And yeah, Jackie, look, I agree that a lot of parishes don't have the resources and the money for engaging external help. I completely understand that. And yeah, so how do we steward then what you've got in your church as well to be able to forward the mission and to future-proof your church as well? And I know that they're very hard questions. This program isn't the only thing that I offer to churches as well. So if there are more like specific areas that you're wanting to get some answers around, like social media, I'm meeting with the church next week just to look at their social media strategy, then I'm really happy to talk with you about that as well. So look, I really thank you for your time today. I thank you for your involvement. Happy to answer any more questions now. If you need to go, bless you. Thank you so much. And look forward to seeing what God is doing in and amongst us this year. So thank you. If you need to go, that's fine. Helen, do you get written photo, video permission from every person who appears on video, whether that's pre-recorded content or live streaming? If you've got a live streaming service, does every person need to give written permission to be on camera? The best practice is yes. If it's more like incidental, that they're sort of just walking through, even just having a notice up on the outside of your building or outside of few doors can be very helpful. Just that people are aware of that. And if they know that you're live streaming anyway, you can just tailor the traffic a little bit of where people are and where you've got your cameras positioned. That won't stop my daughter Phoebe from coming onto the stage and being right in the middle of the frame. But I've given my permission, so that's okay. All right, Jono, when do the ABS stats come out from the recent census that will help with an avatar? I don't know when the stats are coming out. Have to ask Uncle Google that one. Let's Google it. ABS stats release date. Oh, there's a release calendar. This is fun. Oh, there's lots of different things on there. Bit full on. Not sure. Keep an eye out. Bruce, yeah, thank you. Yes, it's a very challenging time. So yeah, I just want to say then, Bruce, like, are there ways, you know, I'm not saying to merge, but are there ways that you can be sharing content and partnering with other churches or other parachurch ministries to be sharing content or sharing different ministry offerings and things like that? Is something to consider there. Gwen, thank you very much. Any other questions, folks? Michael, hats off to you for coming at 8 a.m. in WA time. we can chat after. You're all sticking around. This is fun. What do you want to get? Doug, good to refresh on these things. You might feel like you're at the beginning of the journey, but I know there's been a lot of work done to get to the point that you're at now. So I believe that that's not wasted. It's not the start and it's not the end. Maybe we're like a couple of steps in from the start. Beautiful. What's on your mind? What's ticking? Feel free to unmute if you want. Unmute yourself and talk if that's easier.
No, that's probably easier for me, Evan. I'm just going to keep typing otherwise. My question, I guess, as you know, in my role with multiple parishes that I'm supporting, I'm seeing a lot of difference in whether they're going to continue the hybrid church kind of thing. So I've heard some that have said we can't keep up with all of this hybrid online stuff. So do we take a back seat and just turf that in the future now that COVID is over? Do we just go back to what we had before? Have you seen a lot of that? Got any thoughts around that?
I can understand that, particularly if they're thinking mainly in terms of the Sunday service. If you're getting, just 2 or 3 people watching and they might not be watching live anyway, and it seems quite like it's just a consumer thing and there's no real interaction there, then you might question the value of why you would live stream. I still think there's potential there, but if that comes down to the effort that's required and the fruit that can come out of it, if that doesn't add up, then maybe you do use your resources somewhere else instead. But again, like when I'm talking about this hybrid ministry stuff, that Sunday service is just one fraction of the rest of the ministry. So where could they, if they're going to turn that off, where can they invest their resources for other ministries and other areas throughout the week? That's what I would throw back at them. And so you might say, yes, that's actually a really strategic decision to make at the moment. And maybe they might switch it back on later on down the track. Sometimes just having a presence there, even if there isn't much engagement, who knows what can come out of that as well. If it's something that easy that they can just switch on, that's okay. But then the other challenge that I want to make, and I spoke about this in the program a few weeks ago, is the importance of having a digital welcomer or a digital host who can really start to draw out much more of that engagement and interaction with people during the service. Because you're not going to have the preacher up the front able to do this and talk to everyone else at the same time as well. So yeah, there needs to be almost like a volunteer role set up for that if there's not already. And then working on how we can incorporate and structure the service a bit more for the online audience as well. Whether that's having some questions planned at different times and things like that. Great question, thank you. Any other thoughts there? Is that the path you were on with that?
Yeah, it's pretty much where I was thinking. But the main thing, like I think I said earlier about the emphasis on their needs, combining that with the emphasis of the resources that are actually at hand, because we've got some amazing people in our parishes that may not have the skills, but like you've said before, you can teach skills.
Yep.
So focusing on that a bit more.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So yeah, massive questions then on how we resource, where we spend that effort in resourcing, particularly coming more out of this COVID into whatever this normal is. Yeah. Good.
Cool. Well, thanks very much, Evan. I'll chat to you another time.
Thanks, Kelly. Good on you. Good to see you.
Cool. See ya.
Bye. Any other questions, folks? Great. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Susan. Gwen, do people look at their parish websites or has social media taken over? Love that question. So the website still has a place, definitely. For a lot of people, particularly if they're geographically looking for a church in the area, and if they Google church Ringwood, which is where I live, that they're going to go to a website first, unless they've been given recommendations from other people. But I think it's going to feed in both directions. I think a lot of people will land firstly through a website, and then they'll want to find out more and find out that more human side about the church, not just here's what we are, but then they want to see people, and then they'll go over to the socials. They'll go to the Facebook page and be looking at photos and perhaps looking at live streams from the past if they're on there. But then I think what we also need to do is then when you want to have that connection back, okay, people might communicate through Facebook and send comments or maybe even a direct message. That's great. But I think we're going to be sending people back into the website for more engagement, particularly around connecting with people, forms, if you've got events, things like that. You can't, I don't think you can get rid of a website altogether. So I think it has to be both and. Especially if you don't have a church app, then that website really should be that hub of information and knowledge for your parishioners. Because Facebook, stuff's just all over the place. It's not designed for that structure. You sort of can, but it's not intuitive. Is that helpful? Great, thank you.